Okay, we are, I believe, in Perek Chaf. I was on my way here very, very early this morning, and I needed to get gas. So I stopped off at a rest stop to get gas, and when I pulled into the rest stop, I saw that there was a gas tanker. You know, these big trucks that deliver the gas? That apparently had tried to deliver gas to this rest stop, and when it was turning out, it got stuck, and the front of it was in the snow, and the back of it was in the snow, and I couldn't get out. And that's it. We were just stuck in there. So I had to go out on the other side of the highway, go back towards Waterbury, turn around. By the time that happened, davening was long over. Yeah, a little frustrating. But anyway, make some room. Okay, so we've been discussing the Mishkal HaChasidus. The Mishkal HaChasidus means the balance of Chasidus. When someone is a Chasid, the Chasid, as we know, is someone who pushes his Avodas Hashem to be motivated not just by doing the right thing, not just by doing the appropriate thing, but by being driven by a love for HaKadosh Baruch Hu and by a yearning to give HaKadosh Baruch Hu nachas. And that's Chasidus, is that it pulls me to serve Hashem machmas, a certain sense of wanting to lasos nachas ruach liyotzroi. So memela, it creates a certain very significant challenge, and that is that you're no longer following Shulchan Aruch. Right? You're no longer following the dictates of Shulchan Aruch. Shulchan Aruch, that's the minimum. But someone who's serving Hashem in a way that's driven by his love for Hashem, so he wants to do more. But when you're not building your Avodas Hashem based on what's written in Shulchan Aruch, but rather based on what you in your own mind think is the right thing, you have to be really sure that you're making the right calculations. And it's easy to be thrown off in a person's calculations to end up serving HaKadosh Baruch Hu, or thinking he's serving HaKadosh Baruch Hu, thinking he's doing the right thing. So we had a few examples. One of the examples that we did most recently is giving teichacha, giving musar to someone who's not ready to hear it. So a person might think, I love HaKadosh Baruch Hu so much, I don't want that this person should do the wrong thing. Not because I'm a nitpicky, critical person, but because I'm in love with Hashem and I want everyone to serve Hashem properly. It's a very beautiful motivation. This is what I want. I want you to be as much of a servant of Hashem as I am. But if you're not ready to hear it, so then I could be acting in the most powerful sense of wanting to make Hashem proud, but it's just the wrong idea. That's not a Mishkal HaChasidus, the balance of Chasidus. That was the conversation. Okay, so let's start from page Kuf Yud Aleph, the second paragraph, Hine. Okay, he's going to bring in another example of this kind of a mishkal. Hine chayev ha'adam lishmar kol ha'mitzvahs. A person is obligated to keep all of the mitzvahs, b'chol dikdukayim, with all of their details, lifnei mi she'iyah, in front of whoever it is, v'lo yira v'lo yevosh, and not to be intimidated and not to be embarrassed. I want to stop there for a minute. Let's just read the pasuk that he says. V'cheinu oimer, and so David HaMelech said, V'adabra be'edaisecha, I will speak about your mitzvahs, neged melachim, in front of kings, v'lo yevosh, and I will not be ashamed. This is a very, very, very important thing, that we feel and we act with a certain pride about what we do and not be ashamed and try to hide it. We're proud to be a Yid. In fact, there's a halacha that it's forbidden for a person to go into a place hiding the fact that he's Jewish. I know there are certain places in Europe today, in France and so on, that it may not be so smart to walk around with a head covering with certainly not with the talis and tefillin, but maybe not even with the yarmulke. And people try to hide the fact that they look Jewish. Okay, that's a shayla lahalacha. There it actually could be a legitimate thing that in order for a person to preserve his safety, that a person could do that. That you have to ask a shayla, but that's possible. But sometimes stam, we just would like to blend in to the people around us. Chas v'shalom. We like to blend in and not stand out as being Jewish, and that's something it's not acceptable. It's something that it takes away from a certain sense of pride. Ashreinu, how fortunate we are that we have the Torah. We're proud to be chosen by HaKadosh Baruch Hu. We don't flinch from the criticism or the leitzanus or the false rumors that are spread about us. We're out there with confidence. And the amazing thing is that the more confident the Jew is, the more respect he gets. And the more a Jew is apologetic about his Yiddishkeit, the less respect he gets. They're very, very interesting halachas in Shulchan Aruch. There's one halacha, it's a mind-boggling halacha, that it's not so negeya for us, but it's still an interesting halacha, that if a person is bathing by the river and someone is there and he wants to cover himself up so that he shouldn't be, because he's embarrassed, he's not dressed. There's a halacha, is it mutter for a person to cover the place of his milah, because would it look to a guy like he's embarrassed that he has a bris milah? Okay, now obviously this is not negeya halacha l'maisa, thank goodness, but just the concept that we don't want to ever look like we're embarrassed of the mitzvahs of the Torah. There's a medrash that says that when Moshe Rabbeinu told HaKadosh Baruch Hu that, okay, I know that I hit the rock, I shouldn't have hit the rock, I get it, but so I'm not going to make it I'm not going to live to go into Eretz Yisrael, I get it, but 1 second, maybe I could be zeicha to be buried in Eretz Yisrael. Hashem, let me be buried in Eretz Yisrael. So Hashem answered Moshe, the makir ba'arei, yikbar ba'arei. The person who recognizes his land will be buried in his land. Meaning, he said, Yosef HaTzadik, who you took out of Mitzrayim with you to bury in Eretz Yisrael, when he stood in front of Paro, he said, Ki gonoiv gunavti me Eretz Ha'ivrim. He announced to Paro that he comes from Eretz Yisrael. So okay, he can be buried in Eretz Yisrael. But you, Moshe Rabbeinu, dressed in a way that in Parsha Shemais, the daughters of Yisrael went back to their father and they said, Ish Mitzri hitzilanu miyad harayim. An Egyptian saved us from the shepherds. Why did you look like an Egyptian? Why didn't you look like a Yid? That's what the Medrash says. Because of that, Moshe Rabbeinu wasn't Zeicha to be in Eretz Yisrael. There's this unbelievably moving story that Rav Pesach Krohn wrote in his very, very first Maggid book. The Maggid speaks back in the day, 150 years ago. Anyway, so he says this story, and this story, this is not halacha l'maisa, this story. It's just the story to show the emotional element here. But there was a time, over a century ago, that there was something called the Chevron Massacre. Has anyone here heard of the Chevron Massacre? Shalom. 1929. Okay, you familiar with the Chevron Massacre? So it was a yeshiva. It was the yeshiva of Chevron, which were Talmidim of Slavatka that were there, and the Arabs attacked the yeshiva and the town with machetes, and it was literally a massacre. It was a terrible, terrible, terrible incident. Many Kedoshim were killed al Kiddush Hashem. There was a Taimani Bacher in Chevron at the time. You ever see how the Taimanim dress in Israel? They have it's hard to differentiate between a Jewish Taimani and an Arab Taimani because they have a turban and a colorful robe, and they just, they look Arab-like. So there was a Taimani, the Arabs were attacking with machetes. He was a firm guy. He climbed a tree to hide from the Arabs. And these roving bands of animals with machetes in their hands are roaming around the city, and they see in the trees, they see a guy hiding in the tree. They look up at the tree, oh, there's one up there. And then one of them says, no, he's one of us. In other words, he's like, don't worry, he's an Arab like us. This boy was so disgusted to be confused with an Arab that he jumped out of the tree and said, "No, I'm not. I'm a Jew." Like, don't call me. Okay, I would not advise you to do that. Okay, but the power of the emotion is so powerful. This pride. I am a Jew. This is the way I live. My wife was in. You guys are in Baruch Hashem have the schus to be in a college where not only is your Yiddishkeit protected, but you're encouraged to pursue every dream on your Yiddishkeit. But I don't know where some of you might go to graduate school. I don't know where you'll go. And I remember the early years when we were in Waterbury. My wife was in graduate school in Southern Connecticut State University, which is in New Haven. We like to say she went to college in New Haven, so people should think she was in Yale, but she was in Southern. Okay? She and Rebbetzin Kalish were the only two Orthodox Jews in the entire college, which had hundreds and hundreds of students. And they were the only two Orthodox Jews there. Okay? And she had to find her way in a world that was completely secular. Now, it wasn't as anti as today's college environment, to be honest. 25 years ago, there was a certain sense of respect. Nowadays, the anti-Israel tone in the colleges has made it much, much more inhospitable for a frum person. But at that time, it was much more comfortable. But still, she was a frum lady, and she was in graduate school with a bunch of unmarried young, college students. And there were times that she had to be va'adabra be'edaisecha neged melachim v'lei evash. There were times that she had to say her truth without being ashamed. For example, there was she had a thesis advisor, a guy who I ended up meeting, an Italian guy, nice guy, and he was advising her on her thesis. She did a study. It was actually published, her study. She did I told you about her study? She did what? She did a study, and he was kind of coaching her how to do the study. It was based on sending out surveys to pediatricians all over Connecticut. So she was doing this survey, and she had to go report back to her advisor, from time to time. So she goes into his office. There's no window on his door. She walks in and he shuts the door. That's a yichud problem. That's a problem for a man and a woman to be alone in a room that a person would be uncomfortable to walk into and there's no window. That's a problem. So she said to him, "If it's okay, can I ask you to please open the door?" Now, I hope you can understand how uncomfortable that is. What are you accusing me of? It was not easy. But she said it as respectfully as she could. He asked her about it. She explained it to him. A few months later, she had a baby. And she was doing school from home. She was a few weeks after her baby. And he traveled to Waterbury from New Haven to visit us in the house to help her with her thesis. I showed him around the mezuzahs. He was very interested. He told me then that this guy, this single Italian guy, told me that he thinks that the college learned more from my wife than my wife did from college. She said to watch someone who has religious principles that they're not embarrassed of, and she's proud to do, and she's smart, and she could digest information, and she did very, very high GPA. She did very well. But she was able to do that. That took, he was very, very admiring of that. But I want to tell you, it's easy for me to tell you the end of the story now. When she was saying, "I have to ask you to open the door," she didn't know if that would cause her to fail her class, At the time, it wasn't like, "Oh, great, this is a good Pesach Kron story." It wasn't like that. It was a little nerve-wracking. One time he told her to get, that if she wants to send out the survey, she could use the stamp machine that the college office has so that she doesn't have to pay for stamps. And my wife was unsure if he was qualified to give her the heter to save money off the college's postal allowance or whatever it is. So she said to him, "Can I do that? I don't want to do anything that's inappropriate financially, can you imagine the response she could have gotten from that? Are you serious? But that, but the fact of the matter is that that's the way that we do our avodah. And when we express what we need in a humble but proud way, that's the right thing to do. And you're not going to always have the best responses. Sometimes you'll get people talking about you. Sometimes you'll get, you'll get comments or be treated differently. It's not going to always be that way. But there's still a very, 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 very important part of our Yiddishkeit that we carry a certain pride. We're princes. We're aristocrats. We're sophisticated. Our avodas Hashem is not shallow. Our avodas Hashem is real and is grounded. And it's important to walk around with that pride. All of us will have times in our lives, some of you extensively, to be functioning in a completely secular environment. And it's important to hold on to that. I want to tell you something. I'll tell you about my wife's career. I'll tell you one other thing. That there was one time, now is Yeshiva Week season, right? The 5 towns just had Yeshiva Week. The 5 towns were empty for the last week, What? Flat, but you could get it. You didn't have to wait online in restaurants at the 5 towns this week. So, what? Or Tina. You also were able to find parking, I understand. But anyway, it was that time of year, and my wife's coworkers, some of them went to Florida for a weekend. My wife is known in school as Miss Esty, because that's what the kids call her. She does speech therapy for low, for like autistic and that type of population. So they went to Florida, and they saw some women there, some frum women there, acting in a way that couldn't imagine my wife acting. And they came back and they told my wife how upset they were. He's a goyim. They were on the beach. They came back and told my wife. They said we almost went over to them and said, Miss Esty would not be happy with you. Like, one second, shouldn't it be the opposite? Shouldn't they think my wife was the crazy one and these people are normal? But that's not the way it was. They looked up at someone who has standards. I'll tell you one other story. I was just reminded of it this week. I don't know if you were there. Did I tell a story to the boys when you were there a few weeks ago? And it just came up recently. There was a Little League game. Listen to this. And there was a colleague of my wife was there watching her kid play in the game. And she was sitting next to someone who was, who she had a kid in the game. And they're watching. And, Goyim sit next to each other. Basically, they speak Lashon Hara. So she said, oh, you see that other kid? He's one of like 8 kids in a family or something. I don't remember how many. And they were like, oh, yeah. They were like talking about people that have a lot of kids. And then that other lady said, Orthodox Jews have very big families. You realize that more than 1.5 children is a large family for them. So this lady tells my wife's colleague, yeah, they have a lot of kids and they don't treat their wives well. So my wife's friend says, I don't know how many Orthodox Jews you know, but I work with an Orthodox Jew. I promise you her husband treats her well. When I heard that story, I was very happy to hear that. She thinks that. I didn't think I ever met her. I still don't know who she is. But then I remembered that when my wife was sitting Shiva, a few of her colleagues from the public school system Googled how to dress for an Orthodox Jewish Shiva and drove into Brooklyn to be Menachem Avel. And that's when I met them. I don't know what they saw me treating my wife so well, but I don't know if I don't know if there was such a high bar to meet. But anyway, but it's important. V'adabra be'edeisecha neged melachim v'loy eizveish. V'chein shaninu hevi az kanemer. Chutzpah was created for a reason. To be bold. To not be ashamed. To step forward into the world proud of who you are. And that's you'll see the major difference in your life if you do that. That's one side of the Chasidus. For the other side of the scale, that we'll see him as Hashem next time.